Good evening. Wait, we're not on Dr. Schultz. We're going to wait for the video to start?
Yes.
All right, now you can go.
Oh, thank you. So I'm John Schultz, I'm Superintendent of Schools. Thank you for being here tonight. So tonight is a continuation of interacting with the public around the start and end time decision that is slated for March 19th for the board to make their decision. So tonight is broken into three parts. First, I'm going to talk not long. Superintendents can talk long, but I'm not going to talk that long. I'm going to review the proposal and the recommendation that's in front of the board was presented to them last night in their first read. The second part is we've collected questions from parents, and we've got those questions organized in categories, and I'm going to share those questions, and then we've got staff here to respond. Looks like we have some government students here, is that right? Okay, how many are government students? Raise your hands. Oh, wow. Let's give our students a round of applause. That's why we're here. Did you want to take notes about me now, or should we wait with that? You got that already? You need more information?
And I think your teacher wants to verify you're here.
That's right. Well, welcome. It's great. This is a great way to watch government and public policy happen. So we're going to do a presentation of the recommendation. The second part is going to be responding to the questions we've received from the public. We've got staff members here. I'll introduce them later on. And then the third part is going to be for you to come forward to speak to the board. You just simply come to the chair, grab the microphone, and speak. We'd like you to sign in first. There's some sign-in sheets in the back, and you can hand that off to the staff or give it to me, and I'll make sure it gets to the board chair. So I think before we get started, we'll just introduce the board members since they're the listeners tonight. So I'm going to just have them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Matthew Fox. I'm the treasurer. Thanks for coming tonight.
Sarah Patsoff, Vice Chair.
Owen Michelson, Assistant Clerk.
Lenny Wallen-Friedman, Chair.
Ellen Jones, Assistant Treasurer.
Amir Garby, Assistant Clerk.
Erica Allenberg, I'm the clerk.
Okay. So this is the proposal that we're looking at. And to look at it in comparison to today, it flips the elementaries and the middle schools. And if you look, there are three tiers to our system. So the first tier, you can see the five schools, the five elementary schools, as long as continuous progress school. The high school remains in the middle tier, and then the middle schools will be in the later tier. Okay, we got these backwards, so I'm just going to fly through these here. Jameson, why isn't this working? There we go.
Try pointing it back towards the booth. That probably will work better.
Which way? Oh. Okay. So the background for this and the research that the school board was presented by administration, and this has been presented across the country. Their school districts, Wayzata and Minnetonka, responded to this research where it shows that teens having a later start time provides teens with opportunity for more sleep. So by the research shows that the teens receive fewer than 7 hours per school night when their needs for sleep are sitting at about 9 or 10 hours. So how do we adapt our school system to accommodate for that opportunity for sleep? So there's been several Wolfson and Karskadinner's kind of seminal research with this. And it's really due to changes in teens' biological clock, if you will. It's the internal clock changes. The wide awake at bedtime begins even when they're exhausted. Anecdotally, I have a 15-year-old. She was fantastic about going to bed at 7:30 at night on her own. Parents, that was great. Now I'm up at 2 in the morning with her while she's wide awake doing things in her room. It's something that we definitely are seeing among teens, and the research shows that. So the start time decision is based in this research, and there's quite a bit of research. This is another one by the National Sleep Foundation that looked at elementary age students and a change to an earlier school start time, which is what will happen with this switch. Did not decrease the total amount of sleep reported by elementary school students, did not increase the sleep debt, catching up on sleep on the weekends, did not decrease the total amount of sleep obtained by young children, and students were able to move their bedtimes forward to compensate for their early wake times. So the National Sleep Foundation has done the research in this. There is some research that is counter to this too. There was research in Kentucky by Keller that found that earlier start times were associated with lower performance in school districts, in schools and districts, with fewer kids getting free or reduced cost lunches. So this research was associated with a lower performance with districts that had fewer kids getting free or reduced lunches. For schools with more disadvantaged students, later start times did not seem to make a difference in performance. Wayzata schools also did some research relating to elementary students. The association between school start time and elementary students' academic achievement in Wayzata is small to non-existent, so there's really no impact either way with start times for elementary students either at an earlier start time. And primarily what they're saying here is that there's non-statistically significant interactions. In other words, there's a small effect that's happening with these changes in start times as it impacts elementary school students. And middle school achievement suggests there's essentially no association between the elementary school start time and middle school student achievement. So even that is not tied to the middle school. So this research really shows that middle school students are served better with a later start time for their optimum health, for their sleep, and really for their engagement in school. So we know that if students get sleep and they are prepared and healthy, they can be engaged in school in the morning. Just to give you some background, when you make a school start time change, you are changing the transportation of the school system. So one of the concerns that we have when we begin to change is what is the impact on the transportation resource? And there's two parts to the transportation resource. One is the capital, which is the dollar for the cost of a new bus, $100,000. And operationally, we spend $50,000 per bus, which is a cost to the general fund. And that cost to the general fund is the general fund we use for also paying for what happens in the classrooms. That's the resource we use for teaching kids every day. The Center for Efficient School Operations detailed efficiency studied our current schedule, and they did identify that we could reduce current operational costs by 3 buses. So for next, so with the system that we have right now, we can be more efficient by 3 buses. So what did we look at as administrators and a school board? We looked first at one of the options was a 2-tier system, and that 2-tier allows a group of schools to go at tier 1 and a group of schools to go at tier 2, and have those schools in tier 1 start at 8 and have the tier 2 start at 9, which is a nice system. That had a cost of 56 buses. So the goal that we are trying to achieve is 42 buses. So this is 14 buses over. So if you take the 50,000 and multiply that times 14, that's $700,000 just for the operational cost of those buses. Then we looked at the 3-tier bus, and this is what we are proposing. So tier 1 are your elementary programs, your elementary schools, along with continuous progress monitoring, continuous progress programs. Tier 2, Normandale High School and Our Lady of Grace. And tier 3 is Southview, Valley View Immersion. Middle schools, they start at 9:20 and end at 4:05. So this is the impact on the transportation system. As we studied this, the shuttle buses will continue to run after school as they always have, from Southview to the high school, Valley View, high school, Valley View, back to Southview. Activity buses will continue to transport students home from Southview, Valley View, and the high school. And so that really kind of gives you kind of a high level what's going to happen to the transportation resource. What happens before and after school? Programming for families needing school-age care will continue at all elementary schools before and after school. Middle school clubs will continue to be offered 4 days per week for all 6th through 8th grade students. And then, as is done currently, special education will work with before and after school programs to accommodate the needs of special education students. So all of that will stay in place as for our before and after school childcare. Athletics and activities. For theater, we're exploring scheduling theater after school for middle school students still. We also thought that maybe we have a conversation having one middle school theater program, one at Valley View and one at either one of the schools, but have one middle school theater program. Track and field, we're exploring options to integrate our 7th and 8th graders into the high school track practices. And Troy is here tonight, our athletic director, maybe we can talk about that a little later on. Nordic ski, this is one of the challenges we have with this proposal is the 7th and 8th grade Nordic skiers will have a hard time getting to practice because they'll be out late. So Nordic ski could become a 9-12 Nordic ski program. And this impacts about 30 students. And then with our dance practices, we will need another gym. Right now we're using 2 and we'll have to go to 3. So just to review the recommendation, again, it is the first tier. This is the ridership and the load count of each of the schools. This is an average taken over 3 or 4 days this fall and winter. And then the bus is needed for each of the schools as well as the total number for each tier. So you can see in this recommendation we are able to achieve with 42 buses. A couple other things. We know that no transportation schedule will meet the needs of every family. The recommendation after analysis of scientific and the research that I presented, it is clear evidence that it is better for adolescents to start school later, and that's why this recommendation is strong to the board. Best serve the overall health, academic, and developmental needs of the majority of students. The 2-tier system requires 14 additional buses, and I want to add to this that we haven't purchased those buses yet either. So the cost of those buses would be another 14 times 100,000, $1.4 million more. So the benefits would not outweigh the budget reduction we'd have to take to go to a 2-tier system. Earlier elementary school start time will allow the district to take advantage of earlier wake patterns and prime learning times. Efficiencies will enable elementary schools to start at 7:50, as close as we can to 8 o'clock, and start our middle schools at 9:20, as close as possible to 9 o'clock a.m. Other things we are just want to inform the board and the public about that for our first tier, we want to make sure that we arrive 15 minutes before school starts. There are challenges once we drop the elementaries off, we have to go out to other stops to pick up that second tier. So we want to be sure that that recommendations that we will be getting students to school 15 minutes before school starts. We're looking at the stop exceptions. Edina has a lot of stop exceptions, stops that were created many years ago, and we're going to eliminate those, and we're going to have a new stop criteria coming forward. We understand also the traffic issues at the high school, as well as even here on this campus in the morning, and we'll be addressing that through signage and through communication, and also timing, and actually some movement of drop-offs for both parents and buses. Bus stop efficiency will be increased by eliminating these stops, so that elimination allows us more flexibility fiscally to manage already a tight budget. And then some of the special transportation agreements over the years for students, programs that are outside the Edina public school system, we will also terminate those so that we can really run an efficient system for students in Edina. So that's the recommendation. That's the background in it. Again, it's based in the sleep research. So I'm going to go back to the questions now, and I know there's a quick way to do this, but I think
Just so people understand, the questions were ones that were submitted over the past couple of weeks
right.
to the district for review at tonight's meeting.
So the first question, what thought has been put into the safety of young children waiting for a bus in the dark? So in our partnership and you getting your child to the bus stop so that we can pick them up to go to school, once the board approves this, one of the things we would do is look at how can we communicate, partner with elementary students in informing them on safety while you're waiting at the bus stop, and think about some things with our elementary schools. I know our principals would also be interested in that. There was some discussion around school patrols also as kids are walking to school, and thinking about how do we do things differently if that school is starting in that about 15 to 16 day period in January when it's pretty dark. After school activities, I'm going to read these two and then I'm going to turn it over to Val. So Val, if you want to come up and grab the mic. I'm wondering how after school activities will be handled for middle school children. Has the administration considered the negative impacts for students who will be unable to participate in after school activities? So Troy, you probably can come up too. So, oh, you got mics there. So go ahead. Val, do you want to take it?
Sure. I will address middle school programming. I'm the Director of Community Education, and this year we debuted, along with our building administration, an after-school activities for middle schoolers that's sort of two-tiered. We do 2:30 to 3:30 program, and then a 3:30 to 4:30. It's a choice program on Monday through Thursdays for students, and we have found that we have an amazing amount of students that want to participate and be together after school. So our intention is to have the same program delivery, obviously an hour and a half later. So rather than probably doing 2 tiers, we'll do 1. And our data has showed us that students really are participating more fully in 1 of the 2 hours, primarily the first hour after school. So they really, they want to be with their friends, they want to be hanging out. Part of the referendum allowed for additional gym spaces over at the middle schools, and so intramural and activities like that for middle school kids has been pretty popular. So we will still be delivering the same kind of program that we've had this year, Monday through Thursday, 1 hour after school, and we'll continue to have exploration with our middle school principals. We also will be talking to parents and students about if there's any kind of a need for morning activities. We're kind of leaning toward don't do that because obviously we want the sleep, but we will have conversations regarding that depending on if there's interest or need. So.
Yeah, I guess to.
Can I have Troy respond and then, or do you want to add? Go ahead.
No, I just, that addresses activities precisely within the dynamic program, but it does not address activities that may be association-based or any
Mhm.
any other city, any other place.
Yeah.
County, that is in Medina.
Yeah.
So the negative impact, I think, is broader than narrow.
Okay. Okay. I know we met with the swim club and other clubs that have called me over time just to verify the times that the school will be let out. I know that swim club met with us because that's a large number, and that also uses the pools, and talked about the times. And it's they're a little they're crunched a bit, but I think we're going to be okay according to them. But I'm not sure about all of the other. Yep. Okay. 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 All right. Okay. All right. Yep. Yep. Okay. Troy, do you want to address the?
Yeah. So the Val did a nice job of articulating the middle school aspect with regards to after-school programming. In terms of the high school perspective, so our athletic programs have the ability to be 7-12 programs. Not all of our programs are being run 7-12. A lot of our programs are just 9-12 only. So when we're looking at what specifically we're dealing with is we're looking mainly at those 7-12 programs, which In the fall, we're looking at comp cheer, cross country, girls swim and dive, and then in the winter, it's dance, gymnastics, Nordic ski, wrestling, boys swim and dive, and then softball, synchro swim, and then speech as an activity. So those are the 7-12 complexities. So the concern is, as John alluded to with Nordic ski, is really it's about daylight. So if they're getting out at 4:05 and December is a short day, that's one of our concerns. And so we're throwing around some different ideas and how we can take advantage of that. Maybe it's conditions in lighted areas. We do have some lights at the high school, so we looked at, do we look at a 9-12 program only in Nordic ski, and then we do a 7-8 middle school type component that's much shorter and condensed, and maybe it's a beginners only type option. We will still honor the exceptional athlete policy for 7th and 8th graders, as we do with all of our programs. And then, as Val alluded to, we with the new facilities at the high school, we really worked at pulling out a lot of our 9-12 programming out of the 2 middle schools. Not completely out, but at least allowing some gym space for after-school programming. And so we've done that this year, and they've taken advantage of that, and we want to hold true to that and still offer those opportunities as well.
John, can I add a little context?
Oh, go ahead.
I understand the concern about the broader community activities, and it obviously affects some of the, like, athletics. I mean, like, my daughter does gymnastics at tags, and that's not necessarily a school activity, but the timing of when she goes to school affects her ability to do gymnastics. And I think the point is that these conversations don't stop if and when a decision is made. These conversations don't stop. This is a partnership between the school board, the administration, parents, and the community, and it's incumbent upon us as leaders of the school board and the administration to then communicate with the soccer association and with football and with places like tags and places where children in our community go to say, we are making a change, and elementary school now might have this time right after school, and how can we work to accommodate, because none of us, the point is not to limit what our kids can do after school. It is to allow our kids to continue their after school activities and act to enhance their life by allowing them to sleep more. So I think change is obviously very hard, and not knowing what that would look like is very difficult, but I don't want people to think that these aren't things that we're considering and are going to be talking about with community.
By the time they get back from start,
Yeah.
then they have to go to their activities, and they need to eat, and do homework. It's gonna be late,
Yeah.
right?
So what I'd ask you to do is, are you going to, so we'll record this, but express that opinion through presenting to the board, but I guess we just heard it, so that's fine. I don't know how to answer that question because I understand the timing, but I can only talk about it. Yep.
So why not just go to bed earlier? I don't know, I guess I just wanted to
Yep.
go to bed earlier.
Yep.
So, excuse me, we need to get back on track. So you can submit the question if you want, you could sign up to speak, but let Dr. Schultz go through here. There are people who have signed up. We want to just go through the process that we have set up.
So how does the district plan to replace staff at the middle schools that will quit when the late start times are implemented? So talk to our principals about that. I really hope this doesn't happen. I have not heard that to my office, and the principals have talked to and are working with the middle school staff regarding this, and working with them and accommodating, because they also have family needs, because it does change their start time and end time in their day. So we will continue to monitor this because it is our job to retain great staff in Edina. Please address why you think this change is necessary. So what this recommendation does is it gives the opportunity for a child to sleep in and not have to start at 7 in the morning. So if we listen to the research says that kids go to bed later at night because they're more alert, because their sleep cycle, their awake cycle has shifted. So what the school board and other school districts are doing is they are trying to shift so that when the student does sleep, they get the opportunity for extra sleep. Of course, as a school system, we can't be in the room in the houses telling kids to go to bed, when to go to bed, but we are giving the opportunity to families and those kids to have their kids sleep in. And the other one is, what is the benefit of allowing our students the privilege of sleeping in when the reality is life has responsibilities and they must learn to adjust? I think adolescents go through a great deal of adjustment. One of the adjustments that we're trying to help them make in their health is to have them the opportunity to sleep later. What's really interesting about this science is that they actually shift back to more adult or even elementary sleep habits or sleep cycles. So we are really accommodating the student, meeting them where they're at in their life as adolescents. So I think that this benefit allows and teaches kids how they can adapt to their day and adapt to their sleep cycles. Bus funding. Could the district purchase more buses to accommodate all the school start times to be later? Has the administration studied other districts to see how it is done elsewhere successfully? What other school districts' best practices? How is transportation funded successfully in other districts but not Edina? So, Margot, can you take that one?
Good evening. To address the first question in terms of purchasing more buses, we certainly can purchase more buses. Purchasing 14 at one time is a significant capital outlay. We would have to look at multiple funding options, our own capital funds that we have annually for replacement buses we would use. We would look for gently used buses to hopefully maximize our dollars, and in the case of having to purchase 14 buses, we would look at lease purchasing. The capital purchase part is an initial investment, certainly. It's the ongoing day-to-day annual costs of operating each of those buses that Dr. Schultz referred to earlier in terms of the driver, the diesel fuel, the repair, and the maintenance that is estimated at about $50,000 per bus per year. That becomes a challenge to fund because it's out of the general fund. The way transportation is funded, it is under our general education funding, and basically it's a board decision to decide are we going to spend dollars on transportation or other types of student programming or other types of services. Many years ago, way back, I'm going to date myself here, in the early 90s, transportation was a separate fund, and then the state rolled it into the general fund. And so if districts are funding transportation at a different level, there may be a variety of reasons for that. One, that may be a priority for them in terms of how they're spending their dollars. They may have higher class sizes. They might have different programming than we do. It also, there are uniquenesses within each district in terms of the transportation area. We have very few square miles, but we're in a metro area, which is very different than a rural area. And so we do study other districts. We've had, I think, just before I got here, in 3 times since in the last 7 years, we've had Center for Efficient School Operations come in and look at our practices, and we also look at our comparison data annually, and we are very efficient in our transportation services.
David, can you talk a little bit about just how other districts have done this change, and kind of what the industry standard is in shifting these start times?
Well, I think one example that comes to mind would be Burnsville. So Burnsville did shift a couple of years ago now to a 2-tier system. They were able to accomplish that because their transportation system was actually not efficient enough. They had a lot of extra buses, so they're able to accommodate a two-tier system because they had the buses that they had. Where we're kind of in the opposite. We are already efficient with what we have and would need to purchase more buses at that point.
Okay. Go ahead, you can ask
No,
the
no.
question. You want to
So-
do that
No,
one?
no, let's not
Okay.
take questions right now.
Okay.
Let's keep going because I want to make sure the people who have comments can, and if, do sign up though and ask your question at that time.
Okay. Is there any possibility to push all the start times back 20 to 30 minutes? David, do you want to talk about the challenge of pushing them all back 20, 30 minutes? So,
Well, within the system, when you look at whether two tiers or three tiers, you have your run time of the route, the time it takes to get to school, drop, time it takes to get to the next first stop, run the route, get to the school. So when you look at the total setup and the gaps between the schools, yes, could you move it? Sure, but you can't compress it any more than what the schedule we showed on the screen. So if you start later, you're going to end later. It's just all, it's going to shift 100% with itself. We have it as tight as we can make it at this time.
and Troy, related to this question, what impact would that have to shift 20 to 30 minutes later for athletics and how that impacts competition and with other school districts?
Excuse me. The biggest change is home competitions now become early releases for us. So that's the biggest impact.
Okay. So everyone understand that? So we have to early release students in order to make it to the home competition, right? Is that
Correct.
Okay.
Are you referring to the proposed release time of 4 o'clock, or are you talking about pushing that back another 20 or 30 minutes? It would cause early releases.
Right. If you push it back even more.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, at this point, you had questions and comments. At this point, if you haven't, like to fill out a form, and we can collect that and get that to Chair Wallen-Friedman. He will call individuals up by name and sit at the table, grab a microphone. Of course, we ask, as always, we're role modeling for kids tonight, so good civil discourse will be healthy for this conversation. And thanks again for your attention.
So before we get going, are there more sign-up sheets? If you could bring those up. I'd like to get a sort of a gauge as to how many people have signed up, just whether there's a need to change the number of minutes each person has, that's all.
We're not giving,
I am planning on 3 minutes, but if I get with 50 of these, then I would change it. 2 minutes. But I don't anticipate that. 7. Probably gonna get. All right, do we have a couple? All right, welcome everybody. We are going to follow the same format that we follow at the regular school board meetings, which is I will call people up. I'm going to apologize right in the beginning for pronunciation of any of the names that I mess up. Each person will have 3 minutes. And again, the same thing, please don't make any reference to individuals. If you have comments about individuals for some reason, just bring that separately to the superintendent. So the first person is Katie Blazes. Welcome.
I had to start first, huh?
Yes.
First in the list. All right. So I have 2 girls at at Countryside. I have a 2nd grader.
We would
and a
request that you please grab a microphone if you're going to be speaking to the board. Thank you.
Sure. Is this working? Okay. Yes. Slightly creepy. So like I said, my name is Katie. I have a 2nd grader and a kindergartner at Countryside. I also have 2 that have not entered the school district as well. So I'm at the very beginning of, I have 16 more years in the Edina School District, so at some point I will experience every single one of these start times. So for a few years, I'll experience all 3 of them at the same time. So I'm here today to ask the board to either take more time to figure out, someone say my name? Okay, sorry. To either take more time to do more research on the current proposed change or to not change. I don't think either of the options are great. A lot of times you guys are referencing studies about adolescents, sleep study. Very rarely have I seen anything of reference about the elementary kids' sleep. My kids need 12 hours of sleep. So if they're getting on the bus at 7 a.m., that's putting them to bed at 6 p.m. So for working families, that's not very realistic. Also, one major thing of concern is I've talked to teachers across all schools, and most of them were not asked for their feedback on this or not given a chance to give their opinion, which these are the people that are teaching our kids. I feel like they should be the ones that we should be asking firsthand what their opinion is on this. They know better what our kids can do and what they can't do. They're also the ones that have to deal with this every single day. So as a parent who's entrusting my kids to these teachers every single day, I find that extremely frustrating and concerning. So I would appreciate if the board could look to the teachers. If you have, maybe it hasn't been done clearly enough, or maybe it wasn't across the board to all teachers, but I think that should be highly taken into consideration.
Say, Katie,
Yes.
I just wanted to address your last point. I believe it was last week, an email went out to all district staff requesting
It was
feedback.
2 weeks ago that I did my little research
Yes, and that's
study,
kind of
so-
what I figured, but I just
Okay.
wanted to reassure you that an email did come out from the district asking all teachers
Okay.
and staff to give feedback, and actually we've received several emails from different staff at at the middle school and the elementary schools.
Okay, why was it done so late in the game, just out of curiosity? And if you can't answer that, that's fine.
I'm not sure that there's a specific answer to that question.
Okay.
So
But I
have
know the
sought
board
their
did
input.
ask that
Okay.
we get some feedback, and so that communication went out. And we did have had some teachers show up at our last work
Yes,
session,
I was
or
there for
listening
that.
session.
Yep, okay.
So,
right.
but
So
thank you for
that's
your
it for me.
feedback.
So I will say on the first go-through, we talked to all the principals at the elementary and the middle school level and sought their feedback and the feedback from them through the schools. And actually, last year, we also got the feedback from the teachers at Creek Valley. So we had that background. All right. So
Thank you
next
so
is,
much for taking time.
thank you. Next is Lisa Rose, and after Lisa will be Margie Galvin. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my comments. So I'm a Edina parent. I have been for several years, and I'm here to advocate for the middle school children. I know that we have these great studies, and I believe that I don't disagree with them, but I leave for work every day at 7:15, and so that's asking my middle schooler to stay home unsupervised. I do have high school students, and so my preference was she would start school before that they went to school, but if the times are to stay, I would really like there to be morning activities. So for community education, just so she has somewhere to go when they leave, they can all leave together, because I live so close that they walk. So I'm advocating for morning activities and supervision for the middle school students, because although they need sleep, we're asking them to get off to school and lock our homes, and working parents. Does anyone else have that situation? So I'm just really concerned and want to express that I would really appreciate morning activities for my middle school student. Thank you for taking that into consideration.
Thank you. After Margie will be Patrick Dow. Welcome.
Good evening. I am
Margie
a
Galvin.
parent of a middle schooler. I'll be a parent of a high school next year, and I teach at the elementary school. So with the change, I would be the first one to leave my house. My high schooler would be the last, and my son, who's the middle schooler, who is actually under the autism spectrum, would be the last. So I have that same concern as a parent, that he would be left alone at home. But that's my selfish reason. As an educator, I have more specific concerns also about the young kids at the bus, but specifically looking outside of the Edina lens. What about my student who comes in from Savage and Shakopee every day? She would be having to get in her transport at 6:45 in the morning for her transport into school. that's a long time. That's concerning to me for those kids who then are being sent home to homes in Minneapolis, and we're asking, there's potential out there for latchkey children who are 5 and 6 years old, because parents will not be home from work. So if that is the case, is there consideration for offering opportunities for after-school care for those children with a second round of busing being sent home to their homes in Minneapolis? Just a thought. What do we do to protect those young children? At the elementary school, our rooms are often used after school for community ed or enrichment classes, Girl Scouts. And with longer times after school, children are going to be needing to be engaged. So if my space, which I share, and with the whole construction, that was the whole point, is we're sharing spaces, it's really difficult for me to get my room prepared if my room's being used. And if start times are 7:50 and kids are arriving at 7:35, my contract day technically would start at 7:25, 7:30, so I'm walking in and having 5 minutes to prepare for 5 and 6-year-olds. When I'm doing hands-on learning, painting activities, project-based activities, there's a lot of preparation time. And I need to be mentally and physically ready to meet those kids as they're walking in the door so that their day gets off to a good start. That's a concern I have as an educator. If this is implemented, I would ask that we look at a year of being able to really plan, figure out how we're going to make this work, so we're doing it in a good, positive way that will have a good impact on all learners, K through 12. Thanks.
Thank you. After Patrick Dow will be Sherry Claire.
Hello, thank you for
Welcome.
doing these sessions and all this time that you're putting into this. I really appreciate it. I guess my concern is just figure out more about OLG and why isn't their eligible ridership count not there? Nor is their buses used. How many buses do they use?
They ride with the Normandale students, so I'm assuming that the ridership
It's totally inclusive in the number of buses and the number of students is OLG also in there.
Okay, and so is that how their start time is determined, by when Normandale is, or is it anything different? Because I feel like they kind of get, benefit of the latest elementary school to start that is a private school. So again, I guess want to find out more about it. Like if when you're doing that 2-tier system, was it even looked upon if OLG was taken out of the equation? Could we then do the 2-tier system then? An option, and I see that, I know that's, thank you for even looking, so I'm assuming that the investigation has been done. So again, and with the comparison, I think comparison to other cities, does Eden Prairie, Wayzata bus their kids to private schools as well? Does anyone know that?
John, don't we have a statutory obligation to?
I read that, and it said then also, and I'm sorry to cut you off, that it cannot be forced upon the city. And if it's forcing that's at least what I read in the law about it, because that was, again, thank you for doing these sessions, found out about the law, read the law, in that law said cannot be forced upon the community. And if it's forcing our kids to go earlier, then yes, it is forcing it upon us. Also, I don't think anybody in the community was voted upon. Do we do this? Hey, we're just piggybacking with the Normandale students. That's great. My daughter doesn't go to Normandale, but I have heard from Normandale parents that said that their son or daughter is on the bus for 45 minutes because of that. I don't know if that's true or not. It's hearsay. But again, I still feel that if we're having this start time issue, can at least be looked upon where OLG is taken out, or at least OLG is going first?
We actually looked into all of those issues.
Mhm.
And so the way it works is that because Normandale buses all the way around, if you think of it this way, Normandale buses all the way around the entire district. And so if OLG was completely out of it and we removed them, we would still be busing all the way around the school district and picking up the kids for Normandale. And so our district benefits because they basically pay us to pick up their kids and put them on the bus in those empty seats that would be on the Normandale bus. So we benefit from a financial perspective by getting their money to pick them up on a half-full bus we would only be picking the Normandale kids up for. So we've actually run the figures, like you can try to cross Normandale with, I mean, all the CP programs. It doesn't work out. I mean, we did. We looked at dropping them out, putting them in there. It makes our district money financially. And then on top of that, the reason that they're in the 830 tier, which I know bothers some people, I think people think of it as they're in a preferred tier. And how I've tried to explain it to people is that Normandale and OLG are basically tethered to the high school, because Normandale and OLG have the longest routes in our school district, and so do the high school. And
I'm sorry to cut you up, but how does a private school get into that public school system?
Margot, can you talk about the statute that they're requiring?
Neutral with or without.
Well, so that's also another thing. Can us as the community know what that
But I
cost
thought
is?
Margot had
Can
said
we
that there
see
was no
what
capital
benefit we are
benefit.
getting financially from OLG?
Slow down. We cannot have everybody talking at the same time.
I didn't know who else was talking. I'm sorry.
So,
School districts are in Minnesota, are responsible to transport resident students that are eligible for transportation, to include private school students. That is part of our state law to do so. If then we receive state aid for the eligible riders for the private school within our boundaries. If the school district does not, then the aid transfers to the local private school in ways in doing that. So and many districts do it. Every district I've been in has a private school, and we're transporting for them. It's part of what we have to do, is providing service to our resident students.
So, and then could there be the option then, one, again, I'm going back to what I was saying, could we as the community see what the financial cost is? Also, then could we ask OLG to pay more so we could get more buses so we can get the 8:30 start time?
So let me.
Go ahead, Margot.
Chair.
Go ahead, Margot. And Mr. Dow, after this question is answered, I'm going to have to ask that the next person go. Yeah. So, Margot?
OLG does not pay the district. The state pays the district based on the OLG riders. Again, it's a state law for for resident riders to be transported, whether attending a public school or a private school.
And we can't charge OLG because the system is set up that the state pays us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. Thank you. After Sherry Claire will be Matt Goldstein. Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Sherry Claire, and I want to thank you. One thing I wanted to address, I'm a teacher at Southview Middle School. I have been a teacher for 34 years, and 32 of those years have been spent teaching 5th and 6th graders, sometimes in an elementary building. For the last 20 plus years, I've been at Southview Middle School. I feel like the things that I have to say are, first of all, a little out of my comfort zone, and I do thank you for sending the board, thank you for sending the email, because honestly, for all the years I've been here, I've really not been emailed something that specifically asked for feedback. And I started out really in my email, started typing saying, thanks for asking. And sometimes you put yourself out there as a teacher by saying one thing or another, and it's a little nerve-wracking. I feel like I'm a public servant, and I love my job, and I love what I do. I have a little bit of other experience because I'm the parent of kids who have gone through elementary, gone through middle school, gone through high school. One graduated from college, one's still there. And all these issues will pass away, and they will work themselves out. Somehow they do. When my children were in elementary, I live in Mendota Heights, and we were asked to go to meetings similar to this to have our kids wait at a bus stop at 7:15 when they were in elementary, and that was crazy. I went to school early, and my husband got them off to school. We could do it, but it didn't feel right. As a middle school teacher, I want to say that I'm going to dispute your evidence, your adolescent evidence, because adolescents are adolescents and teenagers are teenagers. And right now we have 6th, 7th, and 8th graders at middle schools. 6th graders, when they come into the school year, they are 10 and 11 years old. They are 11 for most of the year, and some of them turn 12. When they're in 7th grade, they're 12 and they turn 13. When they're in 8th grade, most of them are 13 and turn 14. And there are rare instances where some kids actually do maybe a little older than that. But the target group of the research, and I am hearsay. I've seen the slides and I watched the last listening session. And the research, 1998 is 20 years ago. And I realize as a teacher, you can find evidence and data to support anything you want. And so I was more interested in something that came from 2015 and with having to do with elementary kids, because I oftentimes think of my students as elementary kids. And anyway, and I believe that 14 through 18-year-olds, yes, they do change their patterns. And I understand that. I've seen it. I've lived it. My point is, I guess that I'm getting to, is I feel like with my parenting experience and my teaching experience, I feel like we have to allow students to be uncomfortable, and we have to allow them to rise to a challenge, whether it's getting up a little early or going to bed early. We need to allow them to push themselves and plan accordingly. And truthfully, when you're bringing a 6th grader or 5th grader into 6th grade, it's all about planning and keeping track of things and setting out your timing and whatever, and knowing yourself and knowing what you are capable of. And so these are just thoughts that have been floating around in my head. I didn't plan anything till I sat down. And the one thing I do really want to say, a bit of research that a woman in the back mentioned, dinner time. And in my family, although we get up early or are out when they were in practices late or at sporting events or whatever, dinner time became later. But dinner time, I know there's research out there that supports dinner time as successful, well-developed students and children and families, and connectedness between each other, and communication. And really, the 9:20 time, I really, this point in my life, I can go with anything, but I really feel like...
Ms. Claire, could you try to wrap it up?
All right. My last thing is, I guess I'm not sure why there has to be a change. It seems like things have been comfortable, and I was kind of looking to see why we had to change. I guess I still didn't pick up on that. So that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
After Matt Goldstein will be Leslie Iyer. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. I know everybody always plays with the mic. Is this on? Is this on? My name is Matt Goldstein, and my wife and I have a 2nd grader at Countryside and a 3-year-old. I'd like to begin by saying thank you for scheduling these listening sessions and pursuing a more open and transparent engagement process than the previous one. This is a huge improvement, and you owe being commended for it. Thank you. Superintendent Schultz in particular has been very accessible and genuinely interested in hearing my concerns and discussing these. So thank you, John. First, I'm here to say that the proposal to start the Countryside Elementary School day at 7:50 does not work for my family, and to ask that the board either postpone this decision or keep the Countryside Elementary School times where they are. From our family's perspective, starting Countryside earlier creates an unnecessary and avoidable burden that is more than a mere inconvenience for 3 key reasons. First, Countryside's 9:15 a.m. building opening time coincides and aligns with the 9 a.m. drop-off time for the pre-kindergarten programs at Creekside Children's Place. The current schedule permits us to make one consolidated trip to drop off our youngest child to Creekside, then immediately take our oldest child to Countryside. This is a reasonable and efficient morning drop-off pattern for us, and we have scheduled our lives around it. Shifting the elementary arrival building opening time to 7:35 fragments our morning and creates the need for 2 separate trips until our 3-year-old attends kindergarten. Second, my wife and I are concerned that it will be very difficult for our young kids to adjust to the new sleep schedules. Our kids move slowly in the morning, and it takes us roughly an hour to wake, dress, and feed them on the days when they are the most cooperative. Third, my wife and I are night owls, and we work most nights. And the schedule change takes away productive evening work time for us. My evening work includes meeting with clients, attending and presenting at City Council, Planning Commission, and neighborhood group meetings, and desk time. My wife's work is currently focused on launching the remodeling business that she and I started recently, and her volunteer PTO commitment chairing the Countryside Carnival basket raffle fundraiser. In addition, we concur with many of the concerns that were shared at the February 8th listening session, and I appreciate some of the information that we have learned tonight and your engagement on addressing those, so thank you for that. I'm going to try to modify my comments to reflect some of that, so if this seems a little bit choppy, that's why. We're particularly concerned about the proposed change that will cause increased safety hazards due to colder temperatures and higher traffic volumes. And we also strongly concur with Mr. Shaw, who mentioned that this seems to be a misplaced programmatic solution to an inherently fiscal problem of dealing with the increase in busing costs. Our families' lives are structured around our kids' school schedules, and change is hard. Please do not disregard the impact that school schedule changes have on families. I still have some pertinent questions that have yet to be answered, and I don't expect responses tonight, but I want to share them for the record. One, what are the private schools doing to work within the district's busing and resource constraints? I know we've talked a little bit about that tonight. Second, why has the board consistently ruled out spending more money on busing? This seems like saving money on busing is the driving force causing the proposed start time change. Before the most recent election, the board repeatedly said in different ways that any changes to the busing schedules essentially couldn't cost more than it's currently being spent, and I just don't really understand why. And then lastly, is making the middle school start time later simply taking time away from other activities that may result in kids staying up later? Again, thank you for enabling me to share my family's concerns. This community engagement process is a significant and meaningful step in the right direction and a huge improvement over the previous process. Please consider postponing this decision or keeping the times as they are.
Thank you very much. So after Leslie Iyer will be Carrie Lessard. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Edina School Board and Administration, for taking our comments today. My name is Leslie Iyer. As a member of the last two start and end times commissions, I do commend the administration for their much deeper dive into the data around transportation before this latest round of conversations about Edina school start times. The information gathered did finally give all of us a better view into the strengths and weaknesses of both our current and the proposed transit plans in a way that was never completed before. I have deep reservations about some of the data revealed by the transit study, but I do generally support the proposed three-tier plan. My remaining reservations about the process itself surround the lack of willingness to attempt any sacrifice in the name of getting the middle schools and the high schools on the same schedule. The review of this option did not include addressing the district-wide choice programs that incur significant additional costs in transportation. The inequity of having 90% of Edina students' academic schedules dictated by the choice of 10% remains. It also did not attempt to ascertain the savings of marginal changes in walking radius, nor did it combine Valley View busing with the high school busing to, again, try to save money. So moving forward, when assuming we will have the middle schoolers end their day last, meaning after the high school, we run into programming problems, and they are not cost-free. Our West Metro peers that have middle schools ending after the high schools have invested heavily in their middle school activities programs. I would like to ensure that Edina does the same, though again, the ongoing expenses that necessarily surround these changes were not calculated when studying the three-tier versus two-tier academic and transportation schedules. For example, Wayzata has dedicated middle school activity directors on par with our high school activities director. Edina would also need professionals that ensure that our middle school offerings meet their needs. Wayzata offers 8 middle school specific sports that compete in Lake Conference, and Edina currently offers 3. This is before the proposed schedule switch. Ideally, this middle school activities director would be an advocate for all middle school students, especially those who require alternate school day programming to participate. Perhaps this person could also advocate for activity fee alignment for middle schoolers. Minnetonka charges 1/3 what Edina does for its middle school sports while offering 4 times as many. They also do not charge additional fees to participate in the vast majority of their academic enrichment programs. They have placed these values within their pre-K through 12 budget. We need a pathway for 7th and 8th graders to continue to participate in EHS sports and programs, whether these are the 7 through 12 activities, or if these students are exceptional athletes or artists participating in a 9 through 12 program. A serious, well-communicated plan needs to be in place to proactively support these not uncommon exceptions. These could include moving non-core programming to the end of the middle school day for flexibility. Our middle schoolers need sleep, but they need also meaningful activities that balance their core academic work as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. After Carrie Lessard will be Brad Davis, or Bradley Davis.
Can I ask a quick question regarding Leslie's comments? She mentioned that other districts have a middle school activities director, and I know that's not something we have, but how do we coordinate that for our current middle school programs?
We work, Community Education Services offers the middle school sports programs in conjunction with the athletics director, with Troy. So we act very much, our youth programs staff acts very much like a middle school coordinator. And so we also have in the city of Edina a multitude of youth programs offered through, it's not offered through the city, but through our athletic associations. And so there would have to be long conversations because many of our kids participate basketball, soccer, baseball, all delivered for 7th and 8th graders through the city of Edina. So,
thank you.
We don't, yeah.
So the only other thing to add is while Community Ed oversees our middle school track and field program, our middle school cross-country program is run through our high school athletics department. So we've talked a little bit about maybe we adjust that alignment so that both of those programs are run 7-12 through the high school. So that would ease the confusion with our families that have a son or daughter that has to register through the high school for cross-country, but then they have to register through a different program in community ed for track and field, which are similar programs and a likeness. So that would be one possible change we would consider with this change as well.
All right. Thank you.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Carrie Lessard. I am a Edina graduate, class of 99. I moved back into this community with my family for Edina Public Schools. I currently have a kindergartner at Creek Valley. I have a 3-year-old and I have a almost 4-month-old. So I will be in this public school system for the next 18 years. So this is not the last you'll see of me, I'm sure. One thing to note here is that for me, I keep hearing a lot of people saying, you know, my family this and my family that, and all of us have our own situations that we are all dealing with. And I appreciate and empathize with every single one of them. You know, for me, we have a dual working family. So in reality, no start and end time is really that convenient. So unless it's 8 to 5, right? Which is not going to happen. So my point is with saying that we all will adjust. When and if these start and end times become a reality, we all as a community, not just as my family, will adjust. I, for one, think that this proposal is a good one. I am very happy with the data-driven decisions that have been thought through, and with putting this proposal forward. Putting kids' education and biological needs first is very refreshing. And I also think that the collaboration that has been done thus far with the activities and athletics to make that work with this proposed start and end time is also very, very promising. It's clear that there are other nearby school districts that have gone this same route and have seen success, and that we are competing with in terms of their education and academic performance. So
thank you again for, all of the work that you have put into this and for listening. I just wanted to make sure that this point of view was also heard and expressed.
Thank you. After Bradley Davis will be Andrea Weisberg. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm Bradley Davis. I'm a visual artist. I'm a painter. And I've got a 9-year-old son, Darwin, at Highlands, so he's a 3rd grader. And first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge as a person of privilege, having, had the finest education that money can buy, a Harvard graduate, St. Louis Country Day. My wife and I shopped around to all the schools in Minnesota, or in the Twin Cities, Blake, Breck. And Highlands was our favorite school. And so we sent Darwin there because we both loved it. And we both didn't love all the other choices. So really, from the bottom of my heart, I would like to express gratitude for what Edina Public Schools offers, and acknowledge all of you for the wonderful, history and what you've built here. And also, I'm grateful to be here tonight to really kind of be present to what it takes to sort of, run everything, and, all the different issues, Nordic skiing, for crying out loud, you got to juggle all these things. So I acknowledge all of you for really, having to look at a lot of different things. And that said, I would just like to express on behalf of my son and the elementary kids that I think it's a bad idea to start them so early. I think that for them, as little people, and I'm speaking from experience here, that they need to sleep. Shifting them back, of course, that will be what happens as they go to sleep earlier. But if they need maybe 11 hours of sleep and they've got to wake up at 6:30 now, to get out and skate and have hockey practice in the evening, it just crunches into, it makes life for the little people pretty inconvenient. So just on behalf of all of them, I would like to suggest that, my recommendation is, if at all possible, shift it around so that the elementary kids can sleep in a little bit as well. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. After Andrea will be Jennifer Hammer.
Well, I didn't think I was actually going to speak today, but I actually do agree with the change. As I have read, research has shown that teenagers will perform better if they have the extra hour in the morning to sleep. Teenagers cannot fall asleep at 9 p.m. I happen to have one. He is half asleep in the morning. His morning classes, I said, "What's going on?" The teacher said, "Well, he's half asleep. His friends are half asleep." And I'm really glad that you're making this change. The extra sleep in the morning has been shown to improve the attention span and ability to concentrate for longer periods of time. Starting later for the junior high, I think will be very beneficial for the teachers, the children, the Edina schools. The test scores will go up. My child is on all the accelerated classes, all the advanced placement classes, and he has a hard time in the morning. The morning for him, he needs that extra sleep. So I think it's going to make a huge difference. And I'm sorry for the individuals who have to change their schedules. It sounds awful. But for these kids, and there's a ton of kids in that junior high, you need to do it for the kids. This is for them. That's what, when I had a child, you put them first. And I think that it's a wonderful thing to change this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. After Jennifer Hammer will be Julie Swenson.
Hello.
Hello.
My name's Jennifer Hammer. I am a parent of two, well,
a new parent in Edina. We came from Minneapolis. We moved to Edina for the grade school system, and my sister has got her kids in the system, and my mom is a resident. And so I guess I have a question about one of the slides. Maybe we can come back to that. But I am entirely with Bradley here, that, my kids, you're talking about it being the new, like, sleeping in program, but my kids are going to be waking up almost 2 hours earlier. And for us, coming from Minneapolis, it didn't work for my family. My kids move slowly, they need time to get moving in the morning. And then at the end of the day, it's all ready for dual income family coming home at the end of the day. Already as it is, it's hard to get in the time to have the quality time to go ice skating or just to go over the homework, the expectations that they have, and that I want to be engaged in. If that time is truncated more, and my kids too sleep for 11 hours, so the end of my day, and I have a kindergartner and a third grader, and my day doesn't end any sooner. I work at the university, and I have events sometimes that start at 5, and it won't work for my family. I know it won't work for these little people. I mean, and for those families that have the kids that wake up early, early morning programs, or I'm interested in maybe some more creative problem solving regarding the budget and maybe moving everything later as was suggested, but it was talked about where moving everything later, well, then there's no time for after school programs for the middle schoolers, but like for the elementary schoolers, they're not doing any after school programming. So, I guess I don't really understand why everything can't, I'm new to the debate too. So let me just think if I've basically covered all my points. And yeah. It was the slide referencing research by Keller 2015, where this research found that early start times were associated with lower performance in schools and districts with fewer kids getting free or reduced cost lunches. Was that for middle school students? I mean, what was that age group? Because I didn't quite understand how that slide kind of fit in with the. So isn't that evidence that starting early for elementary school kids is bad?
It is one data point, yes, and then
Okay.
you have to read through the study to see what the factors are
Okay.
that led to that conclusion.
Well, I guess I would advocate then, because that seems to, I don't really understand how the free or reduced cost lunches, how that relates to, the study, but, it seems to me like that's indication that an early start time would be tough for the little kids. And, the little kids need their sleep. I've seen it with my kids. The difference between last year and this year for my daughter, my third grader now, second grader last year, is huge. She used to hate school. She hated school because every morning was an argument in my household. And now she loves school because she gets the sleep that she needs. And she's, of course, going to Edina schools, which are fantastic. And she's getting all the help she needs, and we love it. So thank you very much for doing all the great work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, you're up next. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
And then Julie Swenson, and then Julie Banker will be next. Welcome.
Hi. Oh, this is great. Thanks so much for listening to everybody. We really, really appreciate it. And it's great to see the faces of the new folks on the school board. And so I'll get right to it. My name is Julie. I have a fifth grader at Highlands, which has been a wonderful experience. We have the best schools. I will agree with you. We looked, in fact, my daughter was at Breck for a year, and it was great. But boy, Highlands better. I'm with you on that. Yeah. And one of the things I noticed when she was at Breck was that we paid for a bus to take her across town to school. So I'm just wondering, a couple of things about this bus with the private school. If we could have transparency to see just how much the state is giving us for this, and if we're really making good margins on that. So like, are we getting some profit? Is it really, really worth it? Is it 6 figures? Is it 7 figures? Like, let's know. And then the other thing is, what if we just ask those LG parents to like pay? Because I think it's an expectation if you have a private school that you might have to, you pay for books, you pay for the uniforms, you pay for the bus, chip in something for that. So I think that's something to look at. I also want to advocate for starting this change in 2019 and to 2020, not right away, but give us all a year to get used to it. Give everyone time to make arrangements. For our family, this is going to be disastrous. At Highlands, we've had the late start. It's been great. It's good for the little kid. I work and my husband works. So for these dual income families, which, to make it here in Edina, you got to have a couple of incomes, right? And so both my husband and I have to be at our jobs early in the morning. And so we've made lots of adjustments to make it work for these 6 years at Highlands. And the whole time we've been looking ahead and thinking, oh, we're going to get to the middle school and then we won't have to do that anymore. We can drop her off and we can both really, dive in and be at work by 8 every day. And that's now, looks like that's not going to happen because middle school is going to start later. So we'll deal with it. But I'd like to give us a year to figure that out, to make arrangements. Maybe one of us could get a different job. Maybe we need to find a different school. Maybe whatever it is, we'll figure it out. But I think that it's better to give it a year. I think that there are a lot of families that are like mine that have this dual income where it just creates a lot of time constraints in the morning. It makes it really difficult, and it's pretty disastrous. And I think it just perpetuates the situation where we have more and more families with more and more privilege coming in here, because if you have one parent who works and you can afford to live in Edina and the other parent doesn't work, it doesn't matter when the start time is because the other parent just drives the kid to school, right? Or gets him to the bus or whatever. But when you're in a situation where both parents have to work, it makes a very different dynamic, and this just really isn't friendly for that. So I just wanted to point those things out. So again, thank you so much. This is great to have these listening sessions, and go Highlands. Thanks.
Thank you. After Julie Banker will be Stephanie Potter. Welcome.
Thank you.
There should be a microphone, whichever one works.
Both? All right. Thank you for taking my question. It was one that I had submitted earlier and does dovetail with the one that just came up from the lady previous. So my husband and I both work. There's also single parent families. And really what we're creating here are 2 tiers. We have the kids who can sleep in because they have a parent at home, and we have the kids who can't because we have to drop them off early. That's what we're doing with middle schoolers. So with all due respect to the study that you're citing as the reason for this vast change that is disruptive for all of us, what we're looking at is really a small subset of the kids that are going to actually be able to sleep in, because the rest of them have to get up and get going because that's how life works. I have to be at work at 7:30. My husband he's off and out of town. So between the two of us, to get our kids up and going, I'm asking my 11-year-old then to get up, get the dog out, get herself fed, get to school, text me that she got to school. Did she remember to lock the door? It's not an amenable solution. And I think it's hasty, and I think it's top-down. The teachers were asked at a very late time, it sounds like, whether or not this was a good idea. And again, I'm respecting, the studies that there are, but the reality, when the rubber meets the road here, is going to be very difficult for families, and ultimately, the success of the school district really relies on a partnership between the families and the teachers and the administration. I think that we're pretty smart here in Edina. We could probably put our heads together and come up with some solutions that are a little bit easier for everyone to digest. We keep going back to this transportation expense. How can we look at that differently? Can we look at 2 tiers? I think we're shutting it down a little bit, and I'm not disrespecting the hard work that folks have been putting in, but this is really hard for families, and it's hard for the kids. The kids who after school, when they're elementary, are going home to an empty house and they're 5 and 6 years old. That's pretty tough. Or am I paying somebody to be after school to watch my kids? How am I going to find somebody to do that? I mean, or are they staying after school to do things when my kid really wants to get home and just unwind because she's an introvert and she'd rather not be go, go, go at school the whole time. It's difficult on both sides of the equation. I recognize that this is difficult, but I would like you to think very hard about what you're asking families to do here. Finally, one other just caveat is the after-school programs for middle schoolers I think would be pretty disruptive because, you know, we're always talking about the sparks and how do we engage our kids and the things that are important to them. And if middle school, which is a very difficult time of life, I think all of us look back on fondness at that time. It's a very difficult time of life. And so we're asking kids to give up their after-school stuff because, sorry, you end school too late. You don't get home really until 4:45. So the reality looks like you get home at 4:45, you can get to your sewing class or your karate or your whatever it is by 6. So then we're eating dinner at, 8 o'clock. Just realistically, I mean, this is a very practical matter. That's how I'm looking at it. I understand this, that the educational studies are smart, but let's be practical about what we're asking folks to do. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. After Stephanie Potter will be David Bass. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having this open forum. And I just want to say Julie's words really resonate with me, and I probably can't articulate as well as she just did all of the concerns that I have, or many of them. So I will just reiterate a couple. I guess having 3 kids, so I have a middle schooler at Southview, I have a daughter at Normandale, and we chose to put her at Normandale even though my oldest was at Concord because of all the great variety and options that we have with the CP program and French immersion. And then I have my youngest is at Concord, and he's a first grader. So this year with the change, it was already a juggle to manage the 3 start times, the 3 end times. And for the dual working parents, and I have a startup business that I've started, so I don't have to be out the door every day, and I appreciate those families that do. It makes it extremely difficult when you have 3 start times or multiple start times and multiple end times. So I appreciate just looking at the elementary kids and their sleep, and the middle schoolers. And while I was initially quite for the later start time for the middle schoolers, because I have one and I appreciate the sleep, I think starting it so late is almost detrimental given the practical aspects of the dinner, the family time, the activities. And from the session today, I don't feel like it's been fully vetted, all of the practical aspects and the activities outside of just the middle school. It seems like you guys have talked about cross-country and Nordic skiing, but at the middle school years, and based on my son and his peer group, they're not necessarily participating in those activities. There's a variety of activities within Edina Association for all the various clubs, and outside of that, dance and music and other things. And so when you have kids that have to get on the bus early, and then you have kids that have to get on the bus later, when does a parent work? You know, if you're not making enough to justify a nanny or someone to be there after school. Right now, I leverage my middle schooler and sometimes even my older elementary to watch my younger son. I don't necessarily want to put him in kids club every day after school, which is what I would end up having to do. And it's nice for them to be home when they can be. So I don't feel like that's been fully vetted. There seems to me a lot of open questions that it seems a little bit premature to rush into a decision, at least for next year. And change is hard for everyone. I get that. I didn't love the change last year when we had a change for Concord. It had to be later. And we've adapted. And I'm sure we'll all do the same, but it just doesn't seem like it's been fully vetted from a practical aspect. And 2, I'm just curious, how many other districts of a comparable size to Edina have a 3-tier system? Because I think for me, it's partially, the later start time is probably good for middle schoolers to some degree, but I think it's the chaos that the 3-tier creates over just changing it to a later start time. So I just wonder what other districts, I hadn't heard anything, have a 3-tier system, and how does that work?
So I think most of them do.
Most of them do?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that in the report, there's a listing of some of the Lake Conference schools and what time they start and how many tiers they have.
Okay, okay, so that's normal, I wasn't, okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. After David Bass would be Melissa Ahrens. Welcome.
Hello. David Bass. I've met many of you before. This is my third actual session listening to this conversation. I have a daughter who is at Countryside Elementary School, and I'm actually not going to talk about what's right or wrong for me and my family. To me, that's irrelevant. There's a lot of emotions go the way. The thing is I've witnessed and I've listened to is that this seems to be more of a financially driven decision than a child-driven decision. I think it's actually pretty clear. You know, sending kids to school before 8 o'clock in the morning, I think is wrong. And I think for little kids, it's incredibly difficult. Kids need sleep, regardless of how you look at it. If we're doing the right thing for the child, you figure it out financially. There are ways of looking at the budget across the entire school. What programs outweigh others? If we need more buses, what programs should be put to the sideline? If we need more bus drivers, what programs should be put to the sideline? What is the best thing for the child? The other thing too is I feel like there are clear holes in the program, and I've heard this several times. One, the teachers being polled. What are the results of that poll? Do we have all the data around that poll? And this is my second listening session. All the teachers that have come up here are opposed to the plan. So if they're opposed to the plan, how many more teachers are opposed to the plan? Listening to what administrators have to say is very different than listening to what the teachers have to say, because they are working with the students every single day. I think that is a gaping hole, and I think before you make a decision, you have to make sure that you listen to them clearly and concisely, and I don't think that's happened. So I think that it would be really worthwhile that the community understands what that looks like. The other piece too is, what does the community really have to say? This is a listening session, but if you polled the entire community, have you sent out a questionnaire or an email or anything saying, what does the community really think? A lot of people don't have the opportunity to come to these sessions because they have other commitments. I've taken the time because I feel like this is important, and I've made sacrifices in being here, but I think that needs to be taken into consideration, and I don't feel like that has. So I'd actually love your perspective on that. And the other piece too, and this is what actually made me a little bit unnerving, is that we talked about the child safety aspect, especially for little kids, and we're going to develop a plan. Okay, that's not good enough. These kids are out there at before 7 in the morning, sometimes, or right after 7, in the dark, in the cold. What is the plan? How are you going to help these kids, 5 and 6 year olds, getting on a bus, giving them tutorials on how they're going to be okay? Doesn't seem like that's good enough. I feel like there's too many things that aren't good enough, and so I'll leave it at that. And I want you to think about those questions. And I would ask that if you are going to make this decision, please make sure that you delay this at least a year to actually give all of this the appropriate amount of time to weigh all the pros and cons and to understand what is the best thing for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just, a lot of things resonate with me there, and I just want to clarify one thing that I've heard, and I don't know if it's widely thought or not, but there's a large financial component that goes around some constraints. For example, we have 3 tiers because of the financial constraint. We've looked repeatedly at 2 tiers as early as January, as most recently January. It's just, that's a financial constraint. And 42 buses is another financial, because again, these are the same dollars that we use to pay our teachers, our intervention specialists, our other programs, that we've decided that because of that, we're not going to spend the extra millions to go to 2 tiers or to buy all these other buses. But which tier level goes first? Is it elementary or is it middle school? That's a cost-neutral decision. There's no cost to leaving middle school early and elementary school go late, and no cost to doing that flip. So the comments that are driving and the data and the input that's driving that decision is not cost. It's what led us to this final decision, who goes early, who goes late. But from there, it's cost neutral.
And we have not done an actual poll per se. We have had communication that's gone out to the community, and so like this afternoon, I believe the email went out at say like 2:30 that there's a listening session tonight, and this is the proposal for the district. And within minutes, we started getting emails, most of them starting with, I can't be there tonight, but here's what I would have said if I was there.
We've had 57 emails since 2:30.
Okay, he has the number. So I although we didn't have a poll, I just wanted you to know that parents who can't be here have taken time to write to us.
That's 57 people out of thousands of kids and families that are part of it. I think there needs to be, what does the community really think? 57 is a fraction of a percent of how the community may feel about it.
Okay.
All right.
Pardon me?
Right, and I'm sorry. Right, and it's you're right. It's not a speed game, and my answer wasn't meant to mean that. It was meant to say that as messages have been sent out, there's been in the know updates every week for weeks now. We've received hundreds and hundreds of emails that we've read through. So I didn't just mean there's 57 today, and those are going to drive our decision making. When the teacher email went out, now we've had more than 50 emails from teachers as well, and there's nothing that's clear cut about how it helps people. This is not an easy decision for anybody. So we are listening, and it is a process, and it's not a game where we send out an email at 2:30 and see who responds by 5. So that 57 email comment meant to say that when we do reach out, we do get meaningful feedback, and we have for weeks now, and we do read every email that we get. So we appreciate these listening sessions, and we calculate everything that comes into play, from the data to your impact on your family to the way it affects all the kids.
So, Ms. Ahrens?
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I have a son who's at Highlands, fourth grader now, and a daughter who will start kindergarten next year. And I guess my thoughts are swapping the school start and end times for the middle schools and elementary schools does not solve the problem. It only shifts it from one age group to another. And as you state, there's no research showing that this earlier start time will benefit our youngest, most vulnerable children. There's some research showing, for the middle schoolers, but where is the research for the young ones? And we all know that our youngest children require the most sleep. 3 to 5, there's lots of studies on that from the American Academy of Pediatrics showing that, kids 3 to 5 require 10 to 13 hours of sleep per night, and children ages 6 to 12 need 9 to 12 hours of sleep per night. So an adequate sleep duration for age on a regular basis leads to improved attention, behavior, learning, memory, emotional regulation, quality of life, and physical and mental health. So sleep is very important for our young ones, and just for those youngest ones who need the most amount of sleep, say your 5-year-old needs that 13 hours, for them to have a 7:50 start time, they're getting up at 6:30 in the morning, having to go to bed at 5 o'clock the night before. Where's that family time? Where's that? They won't even see their father coming home from work, having to go to bed so early. We would miss out on any sort of school family balance. Let's see, and also, so my son is only in 4th grade right now, but already his evening activities have started pushing later and later in terms of he's playing basketball this year, and his game times have primarily been at 8 o'clock at night. He's not getting home from those basketball games. This is the Edina Basketball Association until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. He's a 4th grader, and then having to get up that much earlier, I think, just would be really difficult. And even though the early start time is not ideal for middle schoolers either, just because they're older, they're better able to deal with it. The older you are, just little ones try to wake a sleeping young child, and you know that it's difficult. The older you get, as the teacher who was here earlier stated, it's something you learn to deal with as you age. So I guess I would just ask that you vote no on this proposed change, as it's not in the best interests of our children.
All right, thank you. Lisa Burnham? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Lisa Burnham. I know.
You have to pick up the microphone.
Hi, my name's Lisa Burnham. I know many of you. I've had many of you, your children. I am a high school counselor. I have been at Edina High School for 23 years. I was at Edina High School. The first year I was there was the year right after we went to the late start. So I was there when all of that happened. I have sent out an email because in addition to being a high school counselor, I am also a parent of 2 middle school kids. I was not planning to come tonight, but after I received the email at 2:30 this afternoon, I'm really concerned about this late start time proposal for middle school kids. I've heard parents talk about their elementary kids, and I do understand that. I mean, I think that's a really early time to send a little person out to a school bus. Middle school kid, I mean, it's even a little weird watching your 6th grader walk down the street to catch the school bus and it's dark outside. So even thinking about sending a 5 or 6-year-old out to do that would be a concern to me. My bigger issue, though, because I have 2 middle school kids right now, is the later start time for the middle school kids. I'm also thinking about just the wide range of students that we have in the Edina Public School District. We have kids coming from single-parent homes. We have kids who come from out of district. We have kids who even, at this point, you can go to Valley View or Southview any morning, 6:45 or so, there are kids sitting there waiting because their parents have dropped them off. That's probably not going to change too much. I mean, we've heard Julie spoke very eloquently about kids who are dropped off, they stay, they have to be there. They don't really want to go to a before school session. I mean, I'm concerned. I am living out of district right now. My daughter, I don't know what I would do with her. She could probably come to the high school with me for an hour, but she's not getting any extra sleep. That's not going to benefit her. My son will be at the high school, so that won't be an issue. But you just think about all of those types of changes, and that's my own family. But then I think about, so moving on, kids in the middle school, there are kids in the middle school that take medications. There are kids who are on IEPs. There are kids at Edina. Edina is a great place to be. Believe me, I know. I know many of your kids have done amazing things. But there are kids here for whom school is a struggle. And it is not, we are trying as a high school counselor, myself and my colleagues are getting them through the day. And I think about my middle school colleagues who are also trying to get their middle school kids through the day. I think about kids who are taking a med early in the morning and before their parent leaves for work. And you walk in to Valley View or Southview during the 5-6 block or the 7-8 block. It can be a pretty crazy place anyway during 5, 6, or 7, 8. And then you move that time back even further. I mean, I don't know what the schools would have at 5, 6, or 7, 8 during those blocks. Electives, PE. I mean, you'd have to have a school-wide PE course during 7, 8, really, to get all that energy out. I mean, you're talking about kids who, in that time would start about 2:45 and go until 4:05. That's a long, long time. And it's late. And I think, by the time they're done with school right now at 2:45, they're done at 2:30, but, by the time they're done, they're done.
Ms. Burnham, could you wrap up, please?
I would be happy to, Lenny. Thank you. I think middle school kids do not take AP classes. Middle school kids are trying to figure out who they are. Middle school kids are trying to get involved. By having them start late, you're pushing away things that could get them involved in things in Edina, in things outside of Edina, meaning other activities. And I really would encourage you to reconsider this preliminary vote and not approve this change. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that does conclude tonight's listening session unless there's somebody who hasn't spoken that wants to throw in a last minute. Could you fill out a form? You can fill out the form afterwards. Just give us your name and.
So I'm Carrie Kervita, and I have 3 kids in grade school. Carrie, yeah. And I would also just like to, I was looking at the numbers here, and for a change impacting 4,000 kids, I think it would be really great to do a poll as well. And it could be fairly straightforward. I understand there's budget constraints. You might need to partner with somebody to write the poll, but I'd actually be happy to help with that if you'd like. Because I do think it should have some statistical significance. So, and like I mentioned, just from running the numbers, it looks like it's about 2,000 kids in kindergarten through 5, and about 2,000 in middle school, or 1,600. So I think it'd be great to put some numbers against it to see, like, what do the parents really want? I think the other piece to consider, and what I've heard a lot tonight, is to think about the ecosystem. So, like, what are all the activities surrounding the kids in grade school? What are all the activities surrounding the kids in middle school? And just kind of do some use cases, just to understand, you know, like, why the parents are all saying this. And then the third piece that I'm newer to this as well, but why did the start times go back to 9:20? So grade school was 9:10 last year, and I was just curious if anybody knows why it went back.
Well, actually,
Didn't it?
pretty sure it was 9:15, and it has been, because I've had kids at Highlands. And I think before that, it was 9:20, and then it went to 9:15
Also
because we did a
okay.
5-minute
Yeah.
reduction.
Got it.
And as for 9:25 this year, that was a
9:20.
routing issue. Am I correct on that,
Oh, okay.
David?
Yeah.
That moved us to 9:25.
Oh, okay.
So in middle school was
Yeah.
7:40, and
Yeah.
now it's 7:45 this year. So there's been
Yeah.
little 5-minute tweaks.
Yeah,
5,
because
10
from a
minute
busing
tweaks.
perspective, and my route might be an aberration, but we get picked up at 8:40, and they ride the bus for something like 30 minutes, and I know the bus driver has had a hard time just killing time, so he sits on the side streets, and then he really pokes along trying to come up to our driveway. We see him. I mean, it's not his fault, and I know that there was some back and forth at the beginning of the year about that, and I can appreciate all the calculations that must go into a bus route, but the kids are being picked up 50 minutes early, so it seems kind of odd, 45 minutes early. So in conclusion, I think I just really love to advocate for a poll for parents to really speak their voice. I think the emails are fantastic, but it's hard to go through so much subjective information and glean the key insights when it could be easily done with a poll. So, and again, I would be happy to help.
Thank you. And was there one other person in the back? Great. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Suzanne Bedros. I live in the Indian Hills neighborhood. I have 3 boys, 1 at Normandale and 2 at middle school. They are all in multiple sports, multiple activities, piano lessons, soccer, basketball, hockey, and they're also very good in school. One is in gifted. Actually, 2 of them are in gifted classes. So, and the other one struggles a little bit, but the 2 middle schoolers have always gotten up early. They have no problem getting up early. They're not tired, and they're doing really well in school. And they are getting enough sleep. And so I don't think putting them on a late start will cause them to get less sleep, because they will be getting home later, less time for homework. Right now, they come home from school. They do homework for 3 hours. If they come home 2 hours later, they're not going to be doing their homework. It's not going to get done, and that will cause them to do worse in school, probably drop out of the gifted and be a normal, in the normal classes, because they are not able to get their homework done because they got home from school 2 hours late. I also think having a poll is really important. You should poll all the middle school parents and ask them their opinions. And a few hours is not enough time for working people to respond to emails or to get here. I just happened to catch it. But I also was at another meeting at the high school tonight. And that's why I was late, because I was at a high school meeting. So, you know, you got to give people time to see things. And I agree with everything Julie said. And she said it very well. I think she's gone, but I agree with everything. And I think changing the middle school to a later time is only going to harm the kids because they're going to have less time to do their homework and less time for any activities after school. So I do not support changing the school times. And also, I think a school bus only costs like $300,000. If we're able to get $20 million to redo the schools, I think anyone can get a bus for $300,000. I don't know how many buses you need, but there are ways to work around it. And if you can get $20 million, I think you can buy some buses. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everybody. We are going to conclude tonight's listening session, and we do appreciate the input of everybody. This will be up on the March 19th school board session, and so that will be the time that it will be discussed again by the board and voted on. All right, thank you very much.
I thought we could respond, though, to maybe Margot could respond to being able to levy for buses or bond for buses. Because I know that the bond for the $124.9 million for construction, well, you can clarify that. We're not allowed to purchase buses with that, is what I understand.
That is correct. That bond is for the building improvements that were stated in the review and comment at all of our sites, but basically it's for bricks and mortar. It's not for buses. As I talked about earlier in the program, our options for funding buses, there's the capital equipment cost, and we do have a small amount of capital funds. We could use those. We would have to look at lease purchase options. But there is the ongoing annual operational costs of the driver, the diesel fuel, and that kind of thing, that about $50,000 per bus that we have to figure out how to pay for in the general fund as well.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's, just to clarify again, this financial consideration, it's the Minnesota miracle. 1971, Minnesota transformed education funding so that wealthier districts wouldn't be able to tap those extra dollars when other neighboring districts would then be at a disadvantage. And so the state grants us most of the authority that we ever exercise as a board. The state is really the educational authority. And to the extent that they delegate some things to a board, that's nice of them. But we get money from them, we get stipulations from them, and when they say you may not take more money for these purposes, you may not tax more money for those purposes, those are constraints we live with, even though there's a desire in the community from a lot of people to pay more taxes for this school. There's a desire in the community for a lot of people to reallocate money, especially from, say, the building bonds towards something else. That's just not authority that we have been given from the state. And that's our state's pride in a lot of regards, but it creates a lot of difficulties trying to find an ideal situation for our kids. And that's
It creates confusion, not that it's what the law is, but it's the law. So what's frustrating is it can create confusion, and I can completely see why, if we can raise $124.9 million, why can't we raise a few for the buses? But the state literally does not allow districts to bond for purchasing those types of things. As Margot said, it can come out of other areas, but again, it all has to be within the guidelines and limits that the state sets on us. So even the levy that we just passed has a limit of a cap that we can go to that is set by the state. And again, it's equalization so that richer districts can't tap into more funds than other districts that are poorer. So we really are restricted, and it is, I completely understand that it is confusing.
Can I ask just a question just about the cost of the bus driver? So if there's money to buy a bus, which potentially is, you're saying it's $50,000 to buy 3 bus drivers. But bus drivers use 3 tiers of hours, 3 tiers of scheduling, which is 4 times. If you condense that to 2 tiers and you use that total amount of hours across the entire time, does the cost really change that much?
So,
Meaning that is it $50,000 for bus driver, or is it really now $35,000 for bus driver because they're driving less time?
so you end up with a number of issues. One, you have to figure out where you're going to find more bus drivers who are, no, slow down. Let me, do you want to ask the question?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So you have to find more bus drivers. The other thing is, once you cut the bus drivers' hours, now you have an even bigger problem finding bus drivers. So currently, if I'm correct, Margot, our bus drivers are primarily full-time employees with benefits? Right, so if you could compress it enough so that you could spread it out, then they might be part-time, and now you're going to have a harder time finding bus drivers who are qualified. And what we want to make sure is that our bus drivers are qualified, that our kids are safe when they're on that bus. And the other thing is, you cannot necessarily compress it as much because you have certain efficiencies built into a 3-tier system that aren't necessarily going to work as well as a 2-tier. We have looked at the numbers and tried to see what the cost is, and there is an additional cost if you go to a 2-tier system. It doesn't, I mean, I had the same question you had, which is, don't you reduce the number of hours, and therefore the total hours are the same?
And you would need more drivers, is that
right?
Because you're running the same buses, they're just doing it at the same time. So the streets are busier, but you would need more.
Right, but if we take the money from our budget, then it comes out of teachers. It comes out, I mean, it's operating budget. All right, thank you. All right, thank you, everybody.